What's up YouTube? This is Andrew with Programming Liftoff, and today we are going to complete part 4 of the PyQt calculator tutorial. The next part, part 5, will be the last part, so we are almost there. In this part we are going to implement these binary operations, these operations over here, as well as the equals button. So for example, you could do like 5 minus 2, you get 3, you can't clear it yet, so we'll close and reopen it. The one thing that we won't get to in this video is, say we want to do 4 plus 36. As you can see, we can't enter 2 digits for the second number. We can only enter 1. So we'll fix that in the first part of part 5. But for now, let's get started with part 4. Alright, so this is the project that we left off with in part 3. One thing I want to mention is if you ever can't run your project, you want to make sure you have main selected up here. That's because in our main.py file, that's where we create the application and launch the application from. So whenever we run it, we'll have to run the main.py file. Alright, so let's first start by defining a new slot. We'll call it binary operation pressed. And for now, we'll just say button equals self.sender. Alright, and then we'll go up to the top up here. Let's just copy and paste this line. And we'll change the push button to add. And the unary to binary. So we're just going to connect the add, subtract, multiply, and divide buttons to the binary operation press slot. So we'll change this to subtract, multiply, and divide. Alright, so now we have our operation buttons connected. So right here we want to see what button was pressed and record that information. So we could say if button.text is equal to plus, then we could execute some code. And we could do that for each button to for each add, subtract, multiply, and divide to see which button was pressed. But Qt, it's actually pronounced cute, so cute has a attribute for the button pressed, or for the push button class, and we can just set that attribute to true. So to do that, we'll just say button.setChecked, and we'll say true. Alright, so whatever button was pressed, it doesn't matter. Whichever one sent the signal to call this slot, we'll have that information. We'll just set it checked to true. So to use this this method, this attribute, we're going to actually need to go back up into the constructor, and we'll add some code up here. We'll say self.pushButton add.setCheckable, and we'll say true. So this allows us to check the button. And we want to do this for all 4 of the buttons, so add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Alright, so now we can check the buttons. One other thing that we'll need to do in here is get the number that was entered. So we'll just create a variable, call it first number, or first num, and say equals float self.label.text. So we'll just convert whatever number the user has typed to a float and store that in first number. But when we press equals, we'll need to use the first number in a calculation. So we don't want this to be a local variable to the slot. So to fix that, we'll copy this first num. We'll go up to the top right under class, before the init, we'll just put first num up here and just set it equal to none to initialize it. So now it's an attribute of this class. It can be accessed from any method or slot just by saying self dot and then first number. So now we can store that in first number. Alright, so now let's implement the equals pressed. So we'll just come down here and say define equals pressed. And in here we will need to use if statements. So we'll check if push button add is checked, and if it is, then we'll execute some code. So we'll say label number equals self dot first num. So we store the first num. Now we're going to use that and add that to second num, but we don't have second num declared or defined yet. So we'll come up here and say second num, and we'll just copy this code up here and just set it equal to the label text, the text that the user has typed that's showing up in the label. Convert that to a float, store that there. So now we can add those two numbers together. Now we'll convert it back to a string. And we'll use the same format, 15 digits of precision that we used up here. And then we'll set the text to that new label. And then one more thing, we'll say self.pushButton add.setChecked, and we'll set that equal to false. So once we perform the add operation, we just added it, so we don't want to have that add operation still selected, so we just set that to false. So we can copy this for the other buttons, and we'll change these to elif, because we only want to execute one of these each time we press equals, so we only need to check the first one that evaluates to true will execute, and the rest after it won't need to be checked. So we'll change this to subtract. We'll change the plus to subtract, and then we'll change this to subtract down here. Alright, and we'll do that for multiply. So next one will be multiply. We'll put the asterisk in there. Change that to multiply. Last one will be divide. Alright, so that equals button should be working now. We have the single number up here, so let's connect the equals button. So we'll say self.pushButton equals.clicked.connect. We'll connect that to self.equals_pressed. And if you let that autocomplete, just remember to backspace the parentheses because we don't want to call that method or that slot. We just want to connect a button to it. Alright, so let's run that. So that should multiply two numbers. So 6 minus 3, 63. That's not what we wanted. Why is that? Well, we didn't clear the label after we entered the first number. So we'll need to clear the label if we just entered a number. So to do that, we'll come to the digit pressed slot, and we'll add some code up here. So we'll just check to see if any of these buttons are checked. And I don't like the lines to be too long, so I'll just hit enter after that last OR. I'll move this one down there too. Alright, so should have self.pushButton add is checked, or subtract, or multiply, or divide. So if one of these push buttons are checked, then we're going to come in here, and we are going to, let's just copy this code that we have up here. But we want to get rid of this self.label.text plus. That keeps the current text. We don't want to keep it. So we just pressed 5 plus. and then when we press the next button, we'll see that one of these, that push button add is checked. So since we pressed plus, the next digit, we want it to replace whatever was in the label. So we don't want to append like we do down here, we just want to replace. So now that we do that, we can do a else down here. Else they are typing a number. We do want to append, so we can leave that appending to it right there. So let's run that. So now if we do, let's say 9 times 2, you can see it replaced it. That gives us 18. And as I mentioned, we can't enter 2 digits yet for the second number, so like 2 divided by 54. Yeah, we can't enter that yet. So we'll fix that in the next video. We will also be wrapping up the calculator, finishing the calculator in the next video. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.